Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to show you how I painted this Sisters of Battle model. So to start with, I primed her black to give us a solid colour to work from. And the first thing I'm going to do is come in here with some Corvus black. I'm going to paint this over the gun casing and all of her armour. This is a different shade of black to the primer and just ensures that all of this is a solid colour, and if we make any mistakes we can come back in with Corvus black to smooth it out. So you don't need to be very neat at this stage. This is just a rough base cover to cover that armour with black. So with that Corvus black applies to all of the armour, the next step I'm going to paint is her inner cloak. So for this I'm coming with corn red. I'm just going to apply a couple of coats all over the inside of that cloak. I try not to get this over any of the armour we've painted black, but if you do, you just come in with a little bit of Corvus black and tidy that back up. Just work your way around with a couple of coats, paint all of that inner cloak with corn red. And after a couple of coats we've got a solid cover on all of that inner cloak. So next I'm going to paint the outer cloak. So I'm coming in with Mephiston red for this. I'm going to paint all of the outer cloak with a couple of coats of Mephiston red. Take your time around the armour. If you do get any red on the armour, you can paint that back in with Corvus black. So just work your way around the model and get all of the outside of her robes with a couple of coats of Mephiston red. After a couple of coats, we've got a solid cover all over those outer robes. So next I'm coming in with some lead belcher. I'm going to paint everything we want to be metallic at this stage. So it's all these bits here on the gun, everything other than the casing. It's got a couple of marks on her backpack as well. So just catch all of that with a couple of coats of lead belcher. After a couple of coats, got a solid cover of lead belcher all over those gun areas, the pipes and the bits on her backpack. So next I'm going to paint the skin. So I'm coming in with Bugman's Glow. I'm going to paint the area of her face here. With a couple of thin coats you can get a solid cover without obscuring any of the detail. Let's just work around and paint all of her face with Bugman's Glow. After 2 or 3 coats, got a solid cover of Bugman's Glow, and the contrast and the colours is really starting to pop now. So next I'm coming with Celestra Grey. I'm going to paint everything we want to be white. So that's her hair here, and she's got some markings on her shoulder pads and other areas as well. So catch all of these with Celestra Grey, but be nice and neat. You don't want to get this over anything else. Just take your time and pick out any details with Celestia Grey. After a couple of coats of Celestia Grey, we've got a good solid white on her hair and those fleur-de-lis. So next I'm coming in with Retributor armour and painting the final trinkets that are on the model. So there's this one here on her gun. It's got some bullets in the magazine as well. And this bit hanging down from her waist. So catch all of those with a couple of coats of Retributor armour. Once the Retributor armour's dried, that's all of the base coats applied to the Sister of Battle. So first up I'm going to shade the skin. I'm coming in with Reichland Flesh Shade. Be nice and neat for this, don't want to get this over anything other than her face. And then everything else gets a shade with Nuln Oil. So that's the hair, the gun casing, all of her armour, all of the fabric. Just coat everything with a shade of Nuln Oil.
If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell.
And with those shades dried, you can see we've really added some definition all over the model in those recesses. So the first thing we're going to highlight is the inner cloak. So I'm coming in with Corn Red again and applying this on all of the raised areas. So wherever the shade hasn't settled in the recesses, on either side of that, apply a thin coat of Corn Red to bring it back up to that original colour. You can see the shade has settled in this crease here, so on either side I've come in with some Corn Red to bring it back to colour. So next I'm coming in with some Corn Red and Mephiston Red as a 50-50 mix, and I'm applying this in the middle of that previous layer. By keeping this nice and thin and applying it in the middle of that Corn Red, you'll help build up to a smooth transition to the lighter colours. So that started to add some transition back up to the cloak. So now there's just one final layer of Evil Sun Scarlet, which is like an edge highlight on the sharpest points of all of those folds on the inner cloak and around the edge as well. Keep these nice and thin. These are just an edge highlight on the most pronounced areas and folds of the inner cloak. And that's the inner cloak highlighted up. So it's added some definition and colour back to that cloak. So now I'm going to paint the outer cloak. So I'm coming in with Mephiston Red again, much like before, on all the raised areas. Put a couple of thin coats of Mephiston Red to help bring it back up to colour. leaving that known oil in all of the recesses. So on either side of that, paint up to the known oil, leaving that in the deepest crevices, and bring all of the raised areas back up to colour with Mephiston Red. It's brought some colour back to the outer robes. So next I'm going to come in with a 50-50 mix of Mephiston Red and Evil Sun's Scarlet. And I'm applying this in the middle of the areas where I applied the Mephiston Red before. So it'll keep this nice and thin again and will help build up smooth transitions to our highlights. So just work your way around the robes. Wherever we applied a bit of Mephiston Red before, in the middle of those areas, apply a little bit of this mix. And with that mix applied, it's brought it up one more shade onto the highlights. So now I'm coming in with some pure Evil Sun Scarlet, and once again applying this in the middle of those areas, focusing on the most raised points of all of those folds now. Just applying a thin layer of Evil Sun Scarlet to all of the most pronounced folds on the cloak. And with that Evil Sun Scarlet applied, you can see we've got a nice transition up to a lighter colour all over those outer robes. So that's just one final edge highlight of Wild Rider Red. For this, focus on the most pronounced creases and folds and the very edge of the cloak. So apply a thin edge highlight of Wild Rider Red to all of the sharpest points on that cloak. As you can see there, I came a little bit thick with the paint, so while it's still wet, quickly rubbed it away with my finger, and it's gone. And that's those robes highlighted. So the next step we're going to highlight is her face. I'm coming in with some Cadian flesh tone and applying this on the most pronounced and raised areas. So that's her nose, around here on her cheekbones, her lips and her jawline. So catch all of those areas with a thin little line of Cadian flesh tone. After that's applied, it's added some definition back to her face. So now I'm coming in with Kislev flesh and applying this on all the sharpest points. So that's her nose here, the bottom lip, and a little spot on each cheek as well. So that's the details on the face painted. So now I'm just going to catch the eyes. So for this I come in with some black, and I sink a little bit of this into the eye sockets as a straight line. Being nice and neat, try and not get this over anything we've painted so far. And with some white, I apply this within that black we just applied. It's a thin line in the middle. And then finally, with some black again, I put a vertical line in the middle of that white to act like a pupil. And that's the face painted. So the model's really starting to come together now. So next I'm coming in with some Mechanica Standard Grey. And for this, I'm painting it as an edge highlight on everything that was black. So that's here, the gun casing, and all of the armour as well. Edge highlight all of this with some Mechanica Standard Grey. So really take your time with this step. Make sure you pick out every raised edge with a thin line of Mechanica Standard Grey. So work your way around that gun casing. The gloves here on her arm, as well as the armour panels on her elbow. The shoulder pads get an edge highlight. And then all of the trim on the legs and backpack as well. Just pick out every edge with a thin line of Mechanica Standard Grey. With that Mechanica Standard Grey applied, it started to add some definition to all of that black. So now I'm coming in with some Dawnstone. I'm applying this within that Mechanica Standard Grey as another edge highlight. So be really neat with this stage. Try and keep it within the previous layer and just go back over everything we just painted, putting a little bit of Dawnstone in the middle of those previous highlight steps. So you don't want your paint to be too thin here so it runs away with you, but also you don't want it to be too thick so it's too stark. But just take your time and put a little bit of Dawnstone in the middle of all of that Mechanica Standard Grey. With that Dawnstone applied, it really has made that armour stand out. But there's one final highlight we can do to make it really pop. So I'm coming in with some Administratum Grey now, and I'm putting this as a spot highlight on all the sharpest corners. So here it's all of these corners on the gun casing, putting a little spot in the corners of Administratum Grey. And then for the armour, on all the sharpest points, I'm also putting a little spot of Administratum Grey. But there are some rivets on the armour as well. At this point, if you can, pick those out with a little bit of Administratum Grey as well. And with those spot highlights applied, the armour's really popping now. So the next thing we're going to do is come in with some white scar, and we're going to highlight the hair and all of those fleur-de-lis on the armour. So for the hair, come in with some thin lines and highlight any strands that there are on her hair. Take your time and be nice and neat at this stage. And for these symbols, pick out any sharp edges or points with a little bit of white scar. I'm also picking out some of the buttons on the outer robe at this stage with a little spot of white scar as well. Then with those details highlighted, the models really come together now. The only things left to highlight are the metal. So I'm coming in with some Stormhose silver first and applying this as an edge highlight to all of the silver. So it's around the edges of everything on the gun. And applying some to the metal details we picked out on the backpack as well. So with all the silver highlighted, the only step left to do now is to highlight the gold. So for this I'm using Liberator Gold. And once again, just doing an edge highlight on all of the areas that we painted with Retributor armour. And that is a Sister of Battle painted. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments down below if there's any models you'd like to see me paint. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And happy painting!